All right. Sounds like we are live. I want to welcome everybody to the AAC in the Cloud 2020. Sounds like we are live. And I am echoing on somebody's computer. Today we're happy to have Vicki Haddix, Beth Warren, and Janice Reese. Vicki Haddix, Beth Warren, and Janice Reese. Vicki Haddix, Beth Warren, and Janice Reese. And I'm going to mute my computer so that you guys can just introduce yourselves. I think somebody's going to need to mute theirs as well. I think you all have to do it. All right. I think that's better. So now you guys need to unmute so you can talk.
Okay. Are we ready to share screen?
You are.
Okay. Okay, so as Scott mentioned, we are Vicki, Janice, and Beth. I am an SLP and clinical assistant professor at the University of Memphis in Tennessee. Prior to that, I did coordinate AAC and AT for Boston Public Schools in Massachusetts, which is where some of you probably know me from and where my Twitter handle comes from. And Janice?
I am an OT by trade. My specialty for years was working with children and adults who have complex physical disabilities. So I made the transition into assistive tech 20 years ago because I am an inventor and a maker deep down. And I run an assistive technology center through a nonprofit educational cooperative. We're owned by districts in a number of counties in East Tennessee. So I came into the grant because I actually had been doing so much work over the years through our center, supporting schools with their AAC needs, that it seemed a great direction to go with this grant.
Hi, I'm Beth. I work at Signal Centers in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I've been working with assistive technology for the last 15 years.
And we are going to talk today about the work that we have been doing for Tennessee Talks, which is a grant in Tennessee to build AAC capacity. Just as a quick introduction, we have Tennessee is a very wide state. And so we're divided into 4 different regions. So you have me and Janice and Beth, and then shout out to Nancy Walford, who started with the grant a few months ago out in the east corner of Tennessee, and Molly Ricks and Lori Crockett prior to her. So what is Tennessee Talks? It's a 5-year grant project. We're funded by the Tennessee Department of Education. And as you saw, they're the 4 regional contractors. And we work directly with schools at no cost to them to support students and staff and parents, and ideally to grow professional learning communities and build that capacity. There's the link to the website, which we'll show you a little bit later. Quick housekeeping note, we're going to try and finish. We should finish. We timed this correctly. We should finish with about 10 to 15 minutes left so we can answer questions and check the Slack channel. So what do we do for our school district? These are the things that we list on our website that we're happy to help with. Notice how in no way do we go over, do the evaluation, hand out the equipment, and then leave. That is really precisely what we're not doing. Again, the idea is building capacity, supporting existing school staff to learn more about AAC and to be empowered to do these things on their own. So we do a lot of consultation and coaching. And Janice?
Basically, we wanted to go over where it came from. Our Tennessee Department of Ed had provided a funding for assistive technology centers off and on over the years in like small groups, but they had unfunded those some years ago, and we're looking at a new way to provide services. And the biggest service request was always the need for AAC support at the schools. So they took new funding and headed into this new grant. So they even made note that they said literally in the grant, in the past, we have always found it difficult to determine which schools were seeking assistance and how much assistance they needed for their students. So the State Department of Ed was trying to figure out how to go forward with that to say, let's provide some structure. So what they did realize was that they needed a program that would assist the districts with addressing their AAC needs, but not come in and do the job for them. They needed to provide training to the school staff to better equip their therapists, their paraprofessionals, and their special educators, your related service providers, everybody who basically was involved with those children who needed AAC support, try to help provide training. And it's been customized according to what district needs are. So, and then they also needed someone who could come in and say, okay, let's identify this student who needs help and let's start at the beginning in assisting you in meeting that child's very specific needs. The biggest issue that the state noted was that school-based speech and language therapists, overall, a large number of them have very limited skills and experience with AAC, especially when you're addressing the needs of a child who has some complex physical challenges. That adds an extra component, which we draw in the OTs, the PTs, to that scenario so that we can get everybody involved, making it a team approach. But that was one of the reasons that the grant came about. It was saying we can't make one single program here that's going to meet everybody's needs. We have to reach out and kind of catch everybody where they are. So there was no single point of contact at the state level. And that is something that we've talked about, was that you could contact the Department of Ed, the Division of Special Ed, and they offered you support. And they had some phenomenal resources set up across the state. But there was no single place to reach out for AAC support. So that was something that they wanted to have a name, a contact. We're literally a face for our region that they can call us and say, hey, I have a question about this, or can you come and help me with this child, take a look and make some suggestions, or do you have things we can borrow, which goes on down later to our library. And then there was a disconnect, and I think this is very common everywhere. There's a disconnect between the school-based clinicians and the community service, the health service providers in the community who often see our students. One of the things that I've been very fortunate to do, because I cover the upper and middle Cumberland regions, is work with Vanderbilt University. The Bill Wilkerson Center there has phenomenal speech therapists who reached out to me as soon as they saw the program and said, how can we help? These are the very districts where we serve children who come in for outpatient assessments, and we want to align our services with where the speech therapist at the school is, which is fabulous, because that's what we need, is implementation and carryover and training. So that was one of the things that was a piece that was missing. So this was kind of our connection. And then there was not a statewide assistive technology lending library. We do have our TTAP centers, but a lot of our districts are far flung from those centers. So sometimes they're not even sure what they can borrow or how that works. That's something we've been trying to help them with. But for the most part, we started AAC lending centers. So another option was to borrow from vendors. And we found that a lot of times that was influencing decisions at the school level, because they may not know all of the vendors. And so they may only be limiting themselves to trying one particular brand of device, and there may be other things out there. So we are at the added advantage that we have started the lending libraries, and we're able to assist with the assessment and implementation of those for students. One of the big issues was that in the very first years was that we would try to identify the kids who had the most complex needs. We would literally say, let's go out there and see what we can do to help. So we were providing support to those districts. We were facilitating professional learning communities. We also built a website, which is something that she'll show you a little bit later, so that we can kind of a hub of resources and training. And then, of course, we're continuing to add to our statewide lending libraries. And then years 1 through 4 was basically set that we would pick a few students, and that was set up very specifically that we would each choose 5 students who were identified in each region, and we would guide them through the AAC assessment process. And that has, of course, grown significantly. And we're in the middle of year 3. Year 3 started in February. So we have just started year 3 and we're making great progress, but that's pretty much the scope of services. And then we're trying to lead sustainability through year 4 and 5.
So we thought we'd share some examples of how the grant has worked from each of us. So I'll start using Haywood County Schools as my example. Haywood County is a small, fairly rural county located north of Memphis. I am a city person, so my idea of rural may differ from yours, but and I particularly like the work we've been doing here because we've worked at a district level as well as with some individual students. So we started, I had a meeting with the superintendent, the director of special services, and the lead SLP in the district. And we really sat down and talked about what the grant could do for them, what their priorities were, and how to align those two things. So they really have made a big push towards inclusion. They have all of their preschool classrooms are inclusive. So we did a lot initially with Project Core and kind of rolling out communication boards in those classrooms. And then looking at more of the upper elementary and middle and high school, thinking about some of those individual students as well. I did training specifically with the speech team, and several of the speech team members, as well as some of the teachers that they work with, were able to come to the university to observe AAC therapy that we do at the clinic. Sometimes they observed me, sometimes they observed my students with me kind of narrating what's going on and why. And I think that's been very helpful. And then the speech team took it upon themselves to go through a lot of the Project Core trainings on their own, and then brought what they learned to individual schools. They also included the ESL staff in their Project Core training, which I think was a great idea. A lot of the wonderful strategies we use around encouraging language for our AAC users work really well for ESL kids. And at this point, I go about once a month, or at least I had been going once a month. Everything changed in March, but we had been going once a month to check in on specific students, talk to teachers, kind of keep up momentum, and just sort of insert anything new, like the Communication Bill of Rights. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that we could post that everywhere until I saw an ATIA session on it. But so bringing that kind of new things that we think about and have that conversation. So it's been, like I said, it's just a nice example because we've been able to work kind of on a district-wide priority as well as with those individual students that might need some extra specialty kind of attention. Thinking about one student in particular with some physical impairments as well as visual and language impairments, thinking about how to move that student's communication forward within his classroom has been a challenge, and hopefully we're starting to make some progress there. But thinking about not everybody comes out of school knowing how to work on communication with children like that. And so I think it's been useful to have people with the expertise to go out there and help that. So next example.
Hi, so this is a student that I work with. I have actually seen him through our assistive tech center since he turned 3 and entered the school system. We have worked both on home and at school over those years, getting him just a number of assistive technologies in place, including very low-tech AAC options. But at this point, about a year and a half ago, the push was, we want to go ahead and move forward with a full-blown AAC assessment to secure him a communication device. So the speech therapist was very excited. She's been seeing him since he was 3 or 4 years old, but she says, I have very limited experience with moving in that direction, which we were like, well, we're already here with the grant, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to help. So we provided, you can see we adapted literacy activities. We had been doing some of these things in our AT center, but had been more curriculum focused. And so now we were picking up the AAC component of it and really running with it. So we provided core vocabulary and high contrast. And I'm mentioning some of these things, and they're sort of listed on the next slide in terms of the kinds of things that we actually did with him. And I say with him and with his team. So because we provided all of the staff, the parapro, the teacher, the parent is wonderful, very involved in everything, but we provided them with some simple trainings. Then we did some small class trainings, and then we would model how we moved things into play, the partner assisted communication strategies. He has some visual difficulties, especially exacerbated by hypertonicity and his spasms and things physically that impeded his ability to focus. So we went very slowly. And I think that was one of the biggest things that she found was people will say, well, how long will this take? And so, an AAC assessment is not done in a day. It's one of those ongoing things where you're gathering as much information as you can. And so I would say to her, I will help guide the physical aspects of it and manage getting the loans for you of devices and guide through that process of deciding positioning and how this works. But you are the clinical specialist. You are the speech therapist. So you will guide that part of it. What words do we choose? How do we get him going? So it was nice in that she said, I was afraid someone would come in and try to do this for him, and then I would not be involved. And so she was very happy to have the support at the school, which is the whole goal of the grant, is that we go in and just offer what supports do you need and how can we help you. We made multiple site visits. We launched an ongoing lengthy trial of devices because he had some medical issues that took him in and out for a while. And so we would pick right back up where we left off. And then we did ultimately, just before the holidays last year, we chose a device for him, and with a mixed bag of switch access and some scanning and eye gaze. But of course it arrived 2 weeks after the COVID closures. And so we were just like, okay, now what do we do? Well, we didn't stop. So now we have just started remote support. We're remoting in with the parent. We're remoting in with one of our own speech therapists who is literally modeling and working one-on-one with the child who's at home with the school-based speech therapist participating with that. So this is nice. This has been, like Vicki was saying, it's impacted the school. It's impacted the direct staff, and it's also made an impact on an individual student. And it was a lengthy process because he is a very involved child. And I think it's been very successful in showing them what the process looks like, and also being able to loan them the things that they needed and to provide the staff education. So very successful all the way around.
So my example is an 11-year-old that was autistic and apraxic. He had limited verbal communication. He communicated with some signs and gestures. So I started with him in year 1, which was 2018 of this grant. And the school and the parents were concerned about his communication with teachers and peers, but also his advancement through school, whether he was going to be able to continue with his limited verbal communication, understanding everything and advancing on through the next skills. So we looked at an evaluation We looked at 3 different apps, LAMP, Proloquo, and SnapCore first. Did different activities with him, tried them out. He seemed to navigate more towards a SnapCore. So we chose to do that as a loaner device. And the loaner was provided from the lending library through the grant. And he had that loaner device until he got his own device. So we had denial through insurance, unfortunately, and had to, the parents ended up buying the app to put on his own iPad. But he has been using it for the last 2 years with the help of his behavior assistant and his parents through lots of learning and implementation and modeling and that kind of stuff. At the end of this year, which was 2 years in, he is now saying simple sentences with this device. So we are doing different types of trainings with the grant. We have done specific AAC trainings with specific vendors along with app-specific trainings. We have done trainings on implementation and modeling, the AAC in the schools, evaluation of AAC. We do large and small groups. So I've done a small group of just me and the speech therapist. I've done larger groups where it's been me and 30 other people. We've also presented at different Tennessee-related conferences, such as the TASLIP, the TAT, the PI, and different special education conferences. So we've had lots of feedback. I've had a lot of people tell me that the behavior issues have decreased. So I had one teacher tell me, the self-interest behavior the kid was having had decreased by about 50% because we were using a communication system. They're more engaging in the classroom because now they have a way to communicate. The staff has increased their knowledge. They're wanting to learn, they just don't know. The SLPs are learning more, and then we're getting more carryover in the classroom, and I'm getting some carryover with the parents.
I think that's been one of the biggest perks, was that the grant was designed to send us in to provide this kind of support to our staff, but the parental awareness, parents are much more interested in what's going on because we aren't selling anything. We aren't pushing a single focus or agenda. Nothing is on a timeline. The parents literally did not know a lot about, most of our parents that we've dealt with. That doesn't mean all, but those parents said, I'm confused. I don't really know about this or that. We've been able to provide them resources on our website. We've been able to meet with them up front. We can attend their IEP meetings. That's really helped. And overall, when you're dealing with children, of course, you want the parents to have that buy-in, that investment in what's going on with AAC for their children. The teachers are carrying over implementation with more consistency and more confidence. There's a quote in there later that our state sends out surveys following our visits, and one of them said just that. I feel more confident. Several of them said that. I feel more confident. I feel like I know more now, a few more things than I did, and I get those going, and then I can move up to something else. So that is that's the consistency of it. That's helpful. So, and then of course, their enthusiasm for the devices. A lot of them have never, when I say them, school staff have never actually put their hands on a lot of the more high-tech speech voice output and communication devices. And so sometimes when we say, let's back up and take a look, let's try this or try that. And sometimes they're like, wow, I did not know that existed. And that is part of the purpose of the grant, that we introduce them to a wide array of communication devices and options that are out there. So there's not just one single choice. So now we just have to buy more things for our lending library because I only have a couple of each, and they seem to be loaned a lot. So I'm going to have to step that up a little bit, which is that's a positive sign. These are the comments that our Susan Ussery is our state coordinator. And she sent these to me the other day just from some of the surveys, because we were trying to look at what are the areas that people feel have been impacted. And they were saying that I really hope this continues. This has been helpful. I see therapists when I'm at some of the conferences. I know Nancy and Vicki and Beth will all say the same thing, that people will come up and say, hey, I need to tell you how so-and-so is doing. And they're excited. Either a teacher is doing something new, embedding in the classroom, or it's being integrated through other settings in the school, or, you know, a parent came up and said, wow, this is terrific. These are good things that are going on for us. Or even if they just come up and say, hey, what's the next thing I should do? You know, can you give me a call and come back? You know, because we want to keep moving forward. So that's been really nice. So.
And I think what these collection of quotes also show is that this grant is very much meeting districts where they're at. So it's not a universal kind of plan. How we deal with each district is very different. And I think these quotes really illustrate that sometimes the district doesn't have an AAC plan, and that's what we're helping them to formulate. And other times they have a lot of good ideas, but need some support in putting them into place. And so it's really meeting the district where they're at instead of a one size fits all. And I think that's been one of the advantages of being able to do this grant, is to individualize it quite as much as we have. So having said all those positive things, there have been some challenges. And this is specifically before March, before the COVID stuff. We'll talk about that in the next section. So it has been tricky finding our students. We initially got a set of a database from the state, but it was a year old based on the previous year's testing. And not all of those kids were still where we expected them to be. Often when we got to the classroom, we found out that's not just one student in this classroom, but really most of the classroom could use some help with the communication system. There's also not a statewide database around these are the teachers and therapists who work in the kinds of classrooms that the kids we see usually are. I don't know why we expected there to be a database, but there isn't one. So it's been hard to find the people that we would like to help. Getting school districts on board. School districts are always concerned about money. That is just kind of a fact. So they're not thrilled with the idea of potentially spending money on devices. And whether or not they let us go through insurance is also an ongoing discussion in some places. And the other problem with offering training is often these trainings have already been set up and the teacher development time has been allocated. And so when we're trying to get on their calendar, it's been a little bit of a relationship building and trying to convince them that those teachers don't necessarily need to process regular Tennessee testing data. Maybe we could borrow them for a little while instead. And then the big one has been about documentation of progress. As you could see in the examples that Janice and Beth shared, in particular, this progress happened over the course of 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's not we did this intervention and you could see it in their end of the year testing, which I think is what people like to see in terms of grant funding. But that's really hard to do. And there isn't a universal documentation tool in place because it probably wouldn't catch all of the progress. So that's just it's an ongoing challenge to figure out how to collect data to show that we are doing things, that everyone is making progress. It's just going to look a little bit different. Other challenges we've had, professional learning communities. A lot of people are tired after they're done with school and don't necessarily want to come to professional learning communities, no matter how interesting and accessible we try and make them. There is a shortage of SLPs that not everyone who is working as a speech teacher in Tennessee will be fully certified. Many of them do great work. I'm not in any way trying to disparage that. But in order to write a report for insurance, you have to have your C's. So that is a challenge. And then, so I'm working on this individually at the university. More and more people are taking AAC, but unfortunately, it's just, again, it's a specialized field. And so the lack of knowledge about it is part of the reason why conferences like this exist. And then overall AAC awareness is, again, an ongoing challenge, which we're working on, but I don't think it's ever going to end. So now from March 2020 on, and kind of how we've approached going more virtual. And who knows when that will change. So
one of the first things we did was build up our website to include lots of resources for everybody. We sent out emails to everybody in our district saying, hey, check out our website. We have stuff listed here. We did our own COVID page, different resources so that everybody could find what they needed. We started doing some blog posts of different things. We have our toolbox, but all sorts of different resources. We also contacted, parents saying, hey, what do you need? So I had some parents who needed some schedules made, that kind of thing. So I helped them make their visual schedules. We did all sorts of advertising of all the free webinars, all the free stuff related to COVID. We also started up some virtual office hours and doing PLCs via Zoom. And then we also increased our social media presence. So we now have a Facebook and a Twitter page.
I thought there was another slide. Sorry.
Okay.
So yes, we've done lots of stuff around going virtual, and in terms of what's next, that's also kind of what we're thinking. This going virtual stuff has made us work a lot more, not that we hadn't been cooperating previously, but we've done a lot more of it since March, and realizing that it doesn't matter whether you're in Memphis or 7 hours away in Chattanooga or Knoxville. If you're attending a webinar, you can attend a webinar. Just be careful of the time difference between Eastern in one half the state and Central in the other. So establishing a webinar series, we're going to continue to advocate for more training across the board and providing ongoing support virtually, which is possibly a lot of what we'll be doing because we do kind of anticipate the schools might limit visitors in person, which seems like a very sensible move. But again, each district is deciding things on their own, so we don't have a statewide plan. So we'll have to kind of see how it goes when school starts up in August. But the plan is to continue to do a lot more training virtually. And continue to develop it from there. So there's our contact info and any questions. Wow, we were so worried about time and we ended up in like 35 minutes.
I actually wanted to point out that, they say good things can come out of bad things, and COVID's been a bad thing, but if anything really positive from a teaching and learning standpoint came from that was a lot of our staff that we deal with, because we are just 4 of us scattered across those quadrants, we have a huge drive time. I am 4 hours from one end of my service region to the other. So to drive out there every time to attend an IEP meeting is not a possibility. It's the same situation that we see in a lot of states, Colorado, Wyoming, the ECHO program. I mean, Wisconsin, it's not uncommon to say, we're just going to reach out to you virtually. But a lot of them were hesitant. A lot of people were saying, I'm not really sure how to do that, or is that really going to be effective? And now they have all been immersed in it. So it's like Scott said, when we were warming up, most people this year said, yes, I'm familiar with Zoom. I know how this will go. Whereas in previous years, there were a lot of novices because most people haven't experienced virtual trainings. So they're very much receptive to having us now say, okay, let us Zoom into your meetings, or let us come into, we can go right into the home. Let us Zoom into the home and offer that same kind of support. So I'm sitting here outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, and my therapist might be sitting in, 4 hours away up on the Kentucky border, and then they're with the family. And then I can actually bring in the speech therapist who works for us and say, okay, you come in, and we have like our own little round table any given time. It doesn't have to be something that's structured around a school hour or a school day. And even when we go back to school, if we choose to do that, I think it's a pretty effective means of serving a large region when you have only a handful of people. So, and that is hard, because if you look at our map, we average about 32 to 33 districts per region. So that's why we started off, the grant was designed that we would choose a set number of students and try to address their needs first. And that would get us in the district and show what we could do to help. And then we would serve other children as we could. So that has been a positive note. People are very receptive. Our PLCs were all canceled for March, April, and May, and the end of the year trainings. So we now have people saying, hey, well, how will we still do this training? And so that's been nice. That's where we came up with the concept of a virtual institute, sort of a webinar series, in that I had a session scheduled on protocol training for an app that had invested in that. I had another session scheduled for 3 or 4 districts on implementation strategies, and Beth had some. So now we're trying to just take all of those, create webinar training with them, and then involve those districts and others like this conference. So there'll be more of a live involvement, and then they'll be recorded and posted to our website for ongoing, for anybody who didn't get to participate. So I think this is kind of our wave of the future. So I have my my Slack up. So Vicki JC Speaks says, right in the Memphis area, and I didn't know about it. So you'll have to reach back out there. Yep. Tracy Carpenter likes our websites.
Thank you. We spend a lot of time on those.
Yes, we do. We're still working on those.
Shout out to Rebecca, who is really actually the person who does most of the work on that.
That's right. We're the thought and she's the hands. So she does a great job for us. She is our assistive tech assistant for the grant. So there is a question. Trisha Gregg says, and this is probably more a question of direct service. So I'm going to pass this one to you, Vicki. It says, what age, even though I think we all have an answer, I was going to throw this one to you. What age should children be using an AAC device in the classroom who is mainly nonverbal, but does have the ability to say a few words to express their needs and wants? And I know you're very strong on feeling on that one. So
it's I think it's hard to prescribe things for people we have not met. But there is no reason why we can't start AAC at a very young age. And no reason not to, really. I think whether or not you go towards a device right away depends very much on the child. But again, there's nothing that says we can't do that.
I've had people ask that question before too, or along those lines. Parents will say, are they too young? Or, and I look at it as the A is alternative, that, community, in that if they have limited to non-functional verbal expression, then there's the augmentative, for communication. And so sometimes even if they have those few words, we need to augment that to give them the power to say more. So yeah, I love to see the kids. And I think the younger kids respond to it more naturally. We have a bunch of tech natives out there, so they tend to respond to it very well. Okay.
Yeah, and even if they were using more words, there's no reason not, if their speech is not consistently meeting their needs, there's no reason not to try other options.
Mhm. Someone says, oh, it's Tracy Carpenter. Do you think this grant will be extended with what is happening with COVID? That is the unknown. Although right now we are only 2.5 years in to the 5-year process. So we know we still have our plan and we've shifted in the right direction. Let's see, if you can share, what is the dollar amount of the grant? What was the total dollar? I don't remember exactly for the year.
I think it was over the, I totally don't remember now. I think it's a little over $100,000 a year for each
region.
For
it's
each
like 105,000,
or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So it's right at 100. Let's see. Yeah, 5 years is probably right at $1 million for 5 years. So yeah. It's not enough, I will say, to hire a bunch of staff, because we would have done that already. So it's paid for the 4 of us and our materials and travel, and a couple of us have the technical support assistants. So, but yeah, we would love to see it expanded. And so would the state. The state does recognize that it's been a powerful tool. It's a great resource to have. So it's just that we're still figuring out how to expand that, which is one reason I mentioned working with our Vanderbilt and some of the smaller University of Tennessee, Knoxville, I know is very involved, their speech and language department, in helping us, because their whole goal is education. So we are reaching out to those speech therapy programs and trying to say, help us with some of our trainings, help us train these staff, help us get your students involved. So we're very creative. All of our programs are.
And since I am both the university evaluator around AAC and the person in this grant, it's kind of working with myself and bringing my students on board when that's feasible. But I am very aware of training these next generations of SLPs to be way more up on AAC, to be open-minded about trying it, and to use it, and know where to get started.
Let's see. Someone says, we're having some trouble getting a device to be used in the classroom for a child who is 5. The staff want her to use her voice, and her mother has her using eye gaze. So I guess the question is more of a, how do you strike a compromise there? What is the plan? It's more of a technical question than it is about the grant, but at the same time, I guess, do you have suggestions?
Why does the classroom staff want her to use her voice? I guess would be my kind of asking a few more questions around that. Is it lack of training, or lack of interest in implementing eye gaze? Or is it the technical difficulties around eye gaze? 5-year-olds, and there are a lot of other 5-year-olds in the classroom. They can be very active, and eye gaze doesn't tend to be very mobile sometimes. So we've definitely run into challenges with classroom implementation for eye gaze systems in the past, partially because of that. But there are ways to creatively brainstorm around it.
How can you help districts with the CARES dollar, which is, of course, the corona virus, the funding for the schools? That is actually a big focus on my end when I am working with my own districts, from my assistive tech center, as well as through the grant, is saying to them, those funds are meant to improve your remote outreach and instruction. And obviously that should include assistive technologies. And we're not just talking the computers or the microphones or the web cameras. You're talking about the adaptations, whether it's adaptive keyboards or specialized software or augmentative communication systems. Because a lot of the systems that belonged to the classrooms did not go home with the kids. And so we are really trying to say, if you have something that a child uses, could you need to work on getting that home, because now school is at home. And so if they were using the device in the school, so if you don't have enough of those, then maybe that's what you should be doing with some of that CARES funding, is investing in added AAC resources. Vicki, someone says, do you have PhD candidates working with you on this grant?
I only have master's students, so I do not. What is, Janice, the student working with you from Knoxville? Did she graduate already?
Oh, actually, she is actually out and working for one of our schools. It took me a second because I'm actually working with Tennessee Wesleyan has an OT master's program, and I am now taking fieldwork students. And so I am actually having them help me with some of my kids create materials and things over the summer. And I'm immersing them in some AAC instruction too. But no, I do have a speech therapist who works full-time for one of the local schools. And she was a PhD candidate for under UT, the University of
Jill, right? Under
yes,
Jill
Dr. Jill McCarthy made her, yes. And so she did not, I don't think she finished. She's some hours still into finishing that, but phenomenal skills in speech and language. I would love to have more of an alliance. And UT is more in Spark. That's the Northeast region with Nancy Wofford, our fourth associate. So, but UT's reached out to all of us. So, let's see. Are you offering ASHA approved CEUs or credit for professional development through this grant? We are not offering ASHA because our sessions vary depending on when we're doing them, and we don't have the funding to pull together a training and then send it in for approval and then offer it again and again and again to make it worth that investment. However, we do gear them towards approval so that they can be submitted towards continuous maintenance hours through attendance. Is that pretty much correct, Vicki, as far as how your staff are handling that too?
So the one, we did do a training for Shelby County, which is more or less Memphis public schools. We did do a training. We had 90 something attendees, and we did arrange ASHA CEU credit for that through the University of Memphis's system that we have to do ASHA CEU credit. But it is very time intensive. And so it takes a fair amount of arranging, and you have to arrange it significantly ahead of time. So there are some barriers about doing ASHA CEUs consistently. And also, again, a lot of the people we train are not ASHA certified. So they're not they don't have their Cs, so they're not looking for CEUs. So it just hasn't at this point been enough of a priority for our constituents for us to consistently offer it. But it is something that we have done through the University of Memphis. And when we do training there, or when I do the training there, it is a possibility.
And I think that's pretty much the end of our time.
Yep.
Is that right?
So thanks everybody for listening.
So this is a replicable project for other states to look into. And
hopefully we gave you some ideas of things that worked well and things that are continuing challenges. So if you're going to replicate it, you go into it with your eyes open.
Well, I'd like to thank Vicki, Janice, and Beth. I would love to see this replicated in other states because I know there's a lot of states that could use this. So they have their emails right there. Feel free to reach out to them as well, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you all again.